Lesson 3. God's purpose in the creation of man. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Readings, Genesis 2. Objective. This lesson shows how God created man and woman, and how sin and death entered the world. Background. Of all that God had created over 6 days, the purpose of God was with the formation of man. Here was the only one of the animal creation who could communicate with his Creator, and to him alone could the Creator reveal his purpose. It was up to man to show himself willing and obedient. Man, superior to the animals. Like all God's creation, man was made very good. He was fashioned out of the dust of the ground and given the breath of life, that he might be a living soul. Genesis 2, verse 7. He became a living, breathing creature. In this aspect he was like the animals. There is, however, a distinct difference between man and beast. The animals are designed and created with the ability to only follow their instincts. They act exactly as they were designed to, eating when hungry or sleeping when tired, etc. But they were not able to give glory to God in the way He desired, because they were not capable of understanding His ways. Man was given that unique ability, making it possible for him to respond with appreciation and obedience, thereby giving glory to his Maker. We are told in Genesis 1 verse 26 that God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." Man was created similar to the angels. Image. Adam resembled the angels in bodily shape. Angels have been mistaken for men. 3 angels visited Abraham. Genesis 18, 1-5. 2 angels stayed with Lot. Genesis 19, verse 1-3. The 4th person in the fiery furnace in Daniel 3, verse 25 and 28. Angels can be disguised as strangers. Hebrews 11, verse 2. Likeness. Paul explains this word as glory in 1 Corinthians 11, verse 7. Likeness refers to the capability to think like the angels. Man was given the ability to understand God's thoughts and develop a character which would reflect his own character and glorify him. This would be on the basis of choosing to do right and turning from doing wrong. The creation of Eve. God had placed Adam over all the creation, giving him dominion over all creatures. Genesis 1 verse 26. But amongst the animals there was not one that Adam himself could share a close relationship with. He did not have a fitting companion. God said, "It is not good that man should be alone." Chapter 2 verse 18. God was to provide a helper suitable for him. This companion was to assist Adam, and together they would complement each other to the glory of God. So on the same 6th day of creation, God created Eve. He put Adam into a deep sleep and removed one of his ribs. From this rib God formed the woman. Adam woke to find a companion who could think and feel as he did. Adam called her woman, which means out of man, in chapter 2, verse 23, and he named her Eve. Why did not God create Eve from the dust as he created Adam? The answer is very important as it establishes the principles of a marriage relationship as God would have us to understand. Adam said of Eve, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." Chapter 2, verse 23. The marriage of the first man and woman plainly demonstrated that a husband and wife were to be one flesh. Jesus Christ tells us that the creation of Eve from Adam teaches us that the marriage of a man and a woman is a bonding together of two people who become one flesh in the eyes of God. Mark 10, verse 6 to 9. God instituted this relationship with the extent that they become partners for life before Him. God instituted this relationship with the intent that they become partners for life before Him. A relationship that man should not divide. Placed under law. All that God had made was very good, including man and woman. However, Adam and Eve lacked character. Because as yet they had not been tested, God desired their love and obedience, and this could only be shown by seeing if they would obey Him of their own free will. To prove them, God was to put them under a trial. It would have been easy for God to create them to obey Him from the beginning. But willing, voluntary service shows God honor and love and glorifies Him. They were permitted to enjoy all the fruit of the garden except one, of the trees of the knowledge of good and evil. They were permitted to enjoy all the fruit of the garden except one, of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Thou shalt not eat of it. Chapter 2, verse 16 to 17. God told them that they would die if they disobeyed this one command. Eating of the fruit of this tree would bring about consequences which would change everything they had so far experienced. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil would cause them for the first time to know evil. If they choose to ignore the warning and disobey, the temptation. All went well as long as Adam and Eve remembered God's law and kept it. Their obedience was still to be tested. Would they obey God under trial or not? The events that followed showed that they did not. In the garden was a serpent. He was more subtle than any beast of the field. That means he had some ability to think things through. He was able to reason on what he saw and heard and speak his thoughts. He did not, however, understand right from wrong, as he was only an animal. He had not been given any law, so obedience and disobedience meant nothing to him, and he had no conscience to guide him. So being subtle, the serpent was not evil. He only acted as he was created. Having heard the command of God to Adam and Eve, the serpent came to his own conclusion on what would be the outcome of eating the fruit of the tree. He reasoned that knowing good and evil would be an advantage, just as the angels who did not die, and therefore they would not die themselves. Chapter 3 and verse 4 to 6. The serpent's reasoning was logical, but it denied the fact that God required obedience, which the serpent did not understand. He was wrong and told the first lie when he said, "Thou shalt not surely die." When first confronted by the serpent, Eve spoke truthfully what she knew to be right. In chapter 3, verse 2 to 3. The problem arose when Eve allowed the thinking of the serpent to override the commandment of God. The logical argument of the serpent caused that truthfulness to be overcome by the lust of her flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. See 1 John 2 verse 16. Eve now saw the fruit as something to be desired rather than something that was forbidden. Chapter 3 verse 6. She was enticed by her desire and allowed it to result in sin. Eve disobeyed the commandment of God, and she in turn enticed Adam to sin with her. The consequences of sin. Having eaten the forbidden fruit, the eyes of the man and woman were indeed opened, but it did not make them wise in the way Eve had expected. They were now filled with the feelings of shame and fear, and attempted to hide themselves from the presence of God. In chapter 3, verse 7 to 10, they were afraid to face the angel of God, and were for the first time ashamed of their nakedness. So they attempted to cover themselves with fig leaves. Adam and Eve's attempt to hide was of no use. God knew their sin and was now to carry out the punishment just as he had warned them. The result of their sin would be death, and from that very day the dying process would commence. From this time on they began to age, and their physical condition began to deteriorate. They were made of the dust, and to the dust they would return. Chapter 3, verse 19. They were no longer very good, but were now mortal, meaning subject to death. Romans 5 verse 12 says, "By one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. As the descendants of Adam, we have inherited his same mortal nature, and so we all die." Not only did Adam and Eve suffer as the result of their sin, but the earth itself was also changed. Thorns and thistles would now grow, which would increase the work they had to do. In chapter 3, verse 18. They would no longer just dress and keep the garden, but it would be hard labour to produce their food. In chapter 3, verse 19. Basic Bible teaching. Man is mortal. Man is a living soul, that is, a living, breathing creature. When he dies, he no longer thinks or feels. The dead know not anything. Their love, their hatred, their envy is now perished. Ecclesiastes 9, verse 4 to 6. In death there is no remembrance of thee. In Psalm 6, verse 5. The grave cannot praise thee. Death cannot celebrate thee. Isaiah 38, verse 18. Adam's disobedience brought the sentence of death upon him and all mankind. Man grows old and dies, and returns to the dust from which he was made. Romans 5, verse 12. No man liveth that shall not see death. Psalms 89, verse 48. The Bible teaches us that man is mortal because of sin. Ezekiel 18, verse 4. Solomon wisely advises us, "Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might. For there is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave whither thou goest." Ecclesiastes 9, verse 10. The word soul is used in the Bible in connection with birds, fish, and animals, as well as men and women. Never is it referred to as being immortal or as living on after the death of the body. The words immortal soul do not occur together in the Bible. Principle for living. God's intention from the very beginning of the creation of man was for men and women to show the Father's characteristics, likeness, in thought, word, and action. This is still what the Father wants from us, for we are being taken out of the Gentiles to be a people for his name. See Acts 15 verse 14. Therefore we must always seek his ways and show God's character, rather than our own ways, which only seek self-fulfillment and lead to destruction. Summary. God created man very good and placed him at the head of creation. Of all that was created, he alone had a mind which could appreciate godly thoughts and worship his Maker. God placed Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, where they could enjoy the fruit of every tree except one, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Adam and Eve disobeyed and took of the forbidden fruit. As a result, the curse of sin and death came upon them and have passed on to all of their descendants, the whole of mankind. These lessons are the words taken from the Christadelphian Sunday School Association notes, www.cssa.asn.au, used with permission. Email your questions to readthebible2@gmail.com, and we look forward to you listening to the next lesson, which will be called the Edenic Covenant.